This video contains content that may disturb you and challenge your perception of reality. Ensure you're in a safe space before you continue. Hello, and welcome to Horror Flix. I'm Charlie. Every week on this channel, we go deep into the most tragic, haunting, and chilling true stories from around the world, from plane crashes to caving disasters and everything in between. But today, we're turning back to the raw, terrifying roots. In this video, we'll be stepping into the darkness literally. First, we'll explore the horrifying true story of a man whose dream cave exploration turned into a desperate fight for survival, one that would leave rescuers and viewers alike haunted forever. Then, we'll look at a freak accident so bizarre, so unbelievable, it feels like it was ripped straight from a horror movie, all caused by a simple, everyday tool, a tape measure. So draw the curtains, grab a drink, and maybe keep a light on nearby. These are 5 tragic moments that prove how quickly life can twist into a nightmare, even when you think you're safe. This is Calving Gone Wrong and Fatal Accidents You Won't Believe. Point 5. The bullet that waited 20 years. In 1893, it started as just another breakup. A man named Henry Ziegland, cold and detached, ended things with a woman named Maisie. Maisie, however, was devastated. The heartbreak consumed her. She fell into a depression so deep, she never found a way back. Not long after Henry's cruel goodbye, Maisie took her own life. Her brother, grief-stricken and filled with rage, decided that someone had to pay, and in his eyes, Henry Ziegland was the reason his sister was buried in the ground. So he loaded a pistol, stormed down to Henry's farm, and without a single word, fired. Henry dropped. Believing he had taken his revenge, the brother turned the gun on himself and pulled the trigger. But fate had different plans. A few minutes later, Henry, bloody and dazed, staggered back to his feet. The bullet had only grazed his face. It flew past and buried itself into the thick bark of a tree standing behind him. He looked up at that tree, stunned. It had just saved his life. Henry went on with his life, started over, met someone new, had a son. 20 years passed. One afternoon, he and his son were out on the land chopping firewood. The sun was setting when they came across that tree, the one with the bullet. Henry recognized it immediately. He took a swing with his axe, but the old oak was stubborn. It wouldn't budge. Frustrated and unwilling to back down, Henry fetched 2 sticks of dynamite from his shed. His son stood a few feet away as Henry jammed the explosives deep into the trunk and lit the fuse. Moments later, boom, the explosion shattered the tree. Splinters rained down like shrapnel, but something else flew through the air, something small and fast. Henry gasped. His body jolted. Then, he dropped to his knees. His son screamed. The bullet, very same one fired at him 20 years ago, had dislodged during the explosion, and in a freak, 1 in a billion trajectory, had struck Henry directly in the head. He died on the spot. The bullet that missed in 1893 had simply been waiting, hiding, until the day it would fulfill its purpose. Some call it coincidence. Others say it's karma, but we call it fate, with a long memory and a cruel sense of timing. Because you can run from the past, but sometimes it doesn't miss twice. Death from above. The tape measure incident. November 3rd, 2014 was a typical Monday morning. Gary Anderson, 58 years old, had just finished a relaxing weekend at home in Summerdale. The kind where you drink coffee a little slower and forget the noise of the city. But today, the city was calling. Gary was a construction worker, blue-collar, dependable. His job that day was routine. Transport drywall from a supplier to a high-rise project in Jersey City. He made the 90-minute drive with a colleague, chatting about nothing in particular, just another day on the job. By 9 a.m., they pulled up to the towering skeleton of a new apartment building. 50 floors of steel and concrete loomed above them, still incomplete, swarming with workers. Gary parked his truck, stepped out, and leaned into the cab to talk to his co-worker. That's when it happened. Far above, on the 50th floor, a construction worker reached for their tape measure. Just a simple reflex, a daily movement. But today, the tape slipped. It dropped. 1 pound of metal, free falling from nearly 500 feet in the air, bouncing off steel beams and scaffolding as it fell, like a bullet with no target, until it found one. Gary didn't see it coming. He wasn't wearing his hard hat. It was still on the seat inside the truck. The tape measure struck him square on the head. A direct hit. 1 second, he was mid-sentence. Next, he collapsed on the ground, blood pouring into the concrete. Panicked shouts erupted. Sirens followed. Paramedics rushed him to the hospital, but it was already too late. Gary Anderson was pronounced dead within the hour. A 1 pound tape measure had turned into a lethal weapon, simply by gravity and misfortune. Investigators were baffled. The math alone was horrifying. From that height, the object had reached nearly 140 miles per hour. No human skull could withstand that. And all because Gary didn't put on his hard hat, a habit he'd followed for decades, except this one time. People asked questions afterward. Why did he park at that spot? Why did he get out of the truck right then? Why wasn't the tape tethered like protocol demands? Why did Gary forget his hard hat on this exact day, in that exact second? The answers don't come easy, because sometimes fate doesn't need a monster in the shadows or a ghost in the attic. Sometimes death hides in the smallest things, in a slip of the hand, a piece of steel, and one wrong step in a right routine. Gary's story isn't just tragic, it's terrifying, because it reminds us that no matter how ordinary the day, the tiniest misstep can be the beginning of something that ends everything. You don't always see it coming, and you don't always get a second chance. Trapped beneath the earth. In 2005, it was just another ordinary evening. 5 friends sat around a dinner table, laughing, eating, completely unaware of the nightmare that would unfold just hours later. They were all from Utah. As the night wore on, the conversation drifted toward caves. Excitement buzzed around the table as Jennifer leaned in, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. She spoke of a strange hole she had stumbled across during a hike, one so hidden you'd miss it if you blinked. A deep, dark gash in the earth. It was somewhere 1,200 feet southwest of Y Mountain, near the Brigham Young University campus in Provo. Jennifer described it vividly. A narrow slash in the ground, unnoticed by officials, its location spread only through word of mouth, almost like a cursed secret. The cave wasn't very big, about 100 feet deep, but the journey inside was nothing short of nightmarish. To enter, you had to squeeze your entire body into the earth, crawling through suffocatingly tight tunnels, with freezing water rushing beneath your palms. If you made it through the initial crawl, the tunnel forked into 2 paths of pitchfork hidden in the blackness. The right fork led nowhere. The left led into madness. A narrow, tightening passage, wetter and colder with every inch. Eventually, it became completely submerged, a death trap for anyone not careful enough. But beyond that submerged section, if you were brave enough, there was a chamber, a pocket of air, large enough to fit 6 to 8 people. They say a rope had been installed, leading from the start of the flooded passage to that air pocket. But swimming blindly through freezing murky water in a collapsing cave, it wasn't a promise of survival. It was a dare. Jennifer's eyes gleamed with excitement as she told the story. The group laughed, jokingly calling it the Cave of Death. Jennifer, she insisted they go that same night. No planning, no preparation, just pure, raw adventure. And so, on the night of August 17th, 2005, they packed lightly. A few flashlights, some water bottles, shorts, sandals, nothing more. The full moon hung heavy in the sky, glowing an eerie yellow as the group trudged into the darkness, looking for that hidden scar in the earth. After what felt like hours of searching, they finally found it. A gaping black wound in the ground. Water gurgled inside. An ominous invitation. Jennifer didn't hesitate. Without a word, she knelt down, wedged herself into the mouth of the cave, and disappeared into the void. One by one, the others followed, their bodies contorting through the suffocating tunnel, the icy water licking at their hands and knees. Their flashlights barely penetrated the darkness, only serving to show how narrow the way truly was. Finally, they reached the fork. Without speaking, they all turned left, heading straight for the flooded passageway. This was what they had come for. The thrill, the fear, the unknown. Joseph was last in line, and as he knelt there, watching his friends vanish one after another into the black, watery maw, something twisted deep inside his gut, a primal warning. Something was wrong. He watched them wriggle and push themselves down into the flooded hole. And then he stopped. Joseph couldn't do it. Something inside screamed at him not to go. He turned around and crawled back the way he came, fighting the rising panic clawing at his chest. When he finally reached the surface, he sat on a rock near the entrance, trying to calm his hammering heart. He waited and waited. Minutes turned into an hour. The night dragged on. No one emerged. Joseph's stomach dropped as the realization settled in. Something was very, very wrong. He stumbled away from the entrance and found someone who had explored the cave before. After hearing how long they'd been gone, the friend's face went pale. 45 minutes. That was way too long. Joseph grabbed his phone and with trembling fingers dialed 911. The police arrived around 4:30 a.m., but when they looked at the situation, their faces turned grim. They trained for cave rescues, yes, but this, a submerged, unmapped cave filled with rushing water. They weren't prepared for that. They called in specialist divers from a neighboring city, a team trained for the worst kinds of disasters. But even they hesitated. This was an unknown cave. No maps, no guides, no idea how deep it went, or what horrors waited inside. The rescuers tried to enter, but the tight waterlogged passages were far too dangerous. Instead, they decided to try pumping water out of the cave and pumping fresh air in, hoping that somehow if the group was trapped, they could stay alive until the water dropped. Joseph sat by the entrance as the night faded into a sickly dawn. He stared into the abyss, haunted by the thought of his friends trapped, freezing, suffocating beneath the earth. At 7:30 a.m. the pumps were finally working, but there was still no sign of the group, no movement, no voices, nothing. Joseph remained by the entrance, hope fading with every passing minute. Had he abandoned them? Had he saved himself? Finally, around 8:30 a.m., the water levels inside the cave began to lower. Rescuers peered inside, flashlights cutting through the murky blackness, and what they saw froze them to the core. Jennifer's body floated there, face down, so close to the exit. She had been coming back. She almost made it. But behind her, the nightmare wasn't over. As the water continued to drop one by one, they found the others, lying in single file, all lined up as if they had been following Jennifer out. And something went wrong. The bodies were frozen in a haunting tableau, faces lifeless, hands still stretched out in front of them as if they were desperately clawing their way to the surface. Their skin had turned pale, and the waterline left a slick, dark mark across their clothes. It looked like they had all been trying to escape something, but none of them had made it. The scene was almost too much for the rescuers. Even seasoned veterans had to turn their eyes away. It was clear now that the cave had claimed its victims swiftly. The final moments must have been sheer panic. Cold water filling their lungs as they struggled to find air, vision clouded by silt, confusion setting in with no clear direction out. Jennifer, who had led them in, had likely tried to lead them out too, but the cave had different plans. One wrong move, one wrong breath, and the cave sealed their fate. Officials later concluded that the disturbance of silt had turned the already tight passage into a blinding death trap. Visibility had dropped to zero within seconds. In the chaos, disoriented and trapped in freezing water, they simply ran out of time. It took hours to recover the bodies. Divers had to navigate the same dangerous, narrow and flooded corridors the group had ventured through. Even with all the equipment and planning, it was a slow and dangerous operation. As morning turned into afternoon, news crews started to arrive. Word had spread fast. The story of a mysterious hidden cave claiming 4 young lives was too eerie to ignore. Cameras flashed as stretchers were carried out, one after another, each wrapped carefully in a white sheet. Joseph sat nearby the whole time, wrapped in a blanket, face pale and hollow. His decision to stay behind had saved his life, but it also meant he had to watch helplessly as his friends were pulled out one by one. He never forgave himself. The cave, once whispered about between students and adventurers, was officially sealed shortly after. Officials filled the entrance with concrete. A heavy iron gate welded shut above it. Warning signs were posted around the area, but those who lived nearby knew that long before the signs, the cave had already earned its true name. 2. The clothes rack that killed Brian. Brian Depledge was 38 years old, a single father of 2, living alone in a quiet flat in Bradford, UK. He was known as a calm soul, gentle, responsible, and deeply devoted to his children. He wasn't reckless. He wasn't careless. But what happened to him that day, no one could have predicted. Late one afternoon in 2011, Brian was doing something we've all done, hanging up wet clothes to dry. His daughter's wedding was coming up, and he wanted his suit to be perfectly ready. He'd washed his outfit and draped it over a plastic folding clothes rack in the living room. Then, back and forth he went, placing shirts, trousers, socks, piece by piece. That's when it happened. While stepping around the rack, Brian accidentally tripped over a small plastic stool. His foot caught, his balance vanished, and in one terrifying moment, he stumbled backward, falling directly onto the clothes rack. It snapped. The plastic structure collapsed in on itself, folding like an accordion with Brian caught dead center. One of the metal bars wrapped around his neck. His head twisted into a tight corner of the rack. He couldn't move. He was stuck. As panic set in, Brian tried to fight back, wedging his hand between the bars, twisting his body, anything. But the more he moved, the tighter the frame squeezed around his neck. To make things worse, the heavy wet clothes he just hung now draped around him, forming a suffocating loop like a net. His breathing became ragged. Each movement just made it worse, and no one was there to hear him. There was no one home, no wife, no kids, no help. Brian was alone, and time was running out. He struggled. The scene told that part clearly. When authorities arrived, the flat was still. The rack was twisted unnaturally, and wet clothes were scattered everywhere, some still clinging to his lifeless body. Brian had suffocated. Slowly, the post-mortem was disturbing. His lungs were filled with fluid, the result of slow, drawn-out asphyxiation. The official ruling, accidental death. But the coroner admitted, in all their years, they had never seen anything like it. This is rarer than being struck by lightning, they said. One freak misstep, one everyday object, and that was it. Brian never got to walk his daughter down the aisle, never got to say goodbye. This wasn't a haunted house. It wasn't a ghost or a curse. It was something far scarier, a normal day gone horribly wrong. Because sometimes, death doesn't wait in the shadows. It waits in your own living room, behind a stool, under some wet laundry, in a plastic frame you thought was safe, and when it wants you, you won't see it coming. On. The toast that took a billionaire. This story doesn't begin in a dark forest or an abandoned house. It begins in the heart of Hong Kong, under glittering lights, inside a 5-star hotel filled with billionaires, politicians, and the illusion of safety. It was August 2nd, 2014, the 50th birthday of Ding Zhang, a man who had everything: wealth, power, prestige. A real estate tycoon worth more than $1 billion, ranked 51st richest person in Hong Kong by Forbes. But with great wealth comes quiet enemies, and sometimes the most dangerous threats don't hide in the shadows. They sit right on your table. That night, Ding Zhang rented out the island Shangri-La, one of the city's most luxurious hotels. He invited 217 of Hong Kong's political and economic elite. Power brokers, CEOs, media tycoons. The room buzzed with money, ego, and secrets. Champagne flowed. Laughter echoed through the golden halls. And then came the toast. Ding stepped up to the mic, smiling, confident, untouchable. He gave a brief speech, something about legacy, success, the future. Then he picked up a bottle of champagne. He twisted the cork, and then it happened. Boom, the cork exploded from the bottle with violent force and hit Ding directly in the temple. He dropped, just like that, crumpled to the ground like a puppet with its strings cut. At first, the guests laughed. Of course they did. Who dies from a champagne cork? But the laughter faded fast, because Ding wasn't moving. His eyes were open, but no one was home. Paramedics were called, guests whispered, some recorded, and Ding Zhang, the billionaire who had conquered the city, was pronounced dead just 20 minutes later. But it wasn't the cork alone. The autopsy revealed a massive brain hemorrhage. Doctors said that even if he had collapsed inside an operating room, they still couldn't have saved him. Then came the twist. Police investigated the bottle. Something was wrong. It was a counterfeit. The champagne contained an abnormal amount of CO2, far more than a real bottle would have, enough to turn a celebration into a death sentence. In recent years, counterfeit alcohol has become a deadly epidemic in China. One article claimed that up to 80% of the alcohol in some cities is fake, and the Shangri-La? No comment. The hotel refused to answer questions about where the bottle came from, or how it made it to the table of one of Hong Kong's richest men. All they said was, it was a tragic accident. But ask yourself this, was it really? Or was this party just the perfect cover for a quiet, elegant execution? A toast to greed, to envy, to death in disguise. Because sometimes the most terrifying monsters don't wear masks. They wear tuxedos and bring gifts. This was Ding Zhang's final celebration. And the guests, they'll never forget it. Fate waits for no one. Whether it's a bullet buried in a tree, a tape measure falling from the sky, a simple clothes rack turning fatal, or even the haunting pull of a hidden cave. These stories show how fast life can flip into pure horror. Drop your thoughts in the comments below. Remember, I see every single one. If you love exploring the darkest corners of real life and you're not subscribed yet, hit that button now. Until next time, stay sharp, stay alive.